This is the Soul-Filled Sisterhood podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist and an empowerment coach for women. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. Now here is today's episode. Episode 97. Well, before I dive into my episode today with my guest speaker, if you struggle with perfectionism or even some people-pleasing behaviors, and you really want to get curious about how that really kind of impacts your life, what are some of the signs that perfectionism may be holding you back in your business or your relationships, head over to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/perfectionist and get your 10 signs you might be a perfectionist today. Now, here is today's episode. Well, welcome, sisters. I am excited about this upcoming conversation because we're going to talk about a couple of my most favorite topics. My guest today is Stephanie Weichert, and she is a certified yoga therapist who helps smart, capable men and women manage stress with some of the most fundamental yet little-known principles of yoga. She has been teaching therapeutic yoga for stress in studios, hospitals, businesses, and with her one-on-one clients since 2005. Now she's on a mission to make meaningful personal growth doable and practical with her signature Make Peace with Stress approach. So each of us can be present, calm, and confident and change the world. I love it. When not mentoring individuals and organizations to transform challenges into catalysts for growth, Stephanie can usually be found under a pile of books or working on writing her first book about how to take charge of your chaotic mind and focus on what's really important to you. Well, Stephanie, I just want to say welcome so much to the podcast. And I had to giggle with your under a pile of books because I know many of my listeners also love reading. So welcome, and I'm glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Nicole. Yeah, I think introverts and bookworms go hand in hand, right?
They totally do. Well, I would love if you would share with my listeners a little bit, like what got you into becoming a certified yoga therapist?
Thanks for asking. It's actually a really interesting story. I'll tell you the short version. In my late 20s, I got to the point after struggling for about a decade with stress-related anxiety and depression. I got to the point where I really recognized that it was taking a dramatic toll on my life.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting part of the story, because that's a pretty, sadly, common story, but the interesting part was that during that decade of really struggling, I developed what I now know as a body-focused repetitive behavior.
Mm-hmm.
One really common one is biting on your fingernails, right? But
Yep.
mine was pulling on my eyebrows and eyelashes. And it was something that I'd struggled with on and off for most of that decade. But at that point in my late 20s, which was 20 years ago now, I had no eyebrows or eyelashes. And still, I was noticing myself sort of, frantically searching for something to pull on. I was still sort of picking at my face, if you will. And I had an experience where I saw myself in the mirror from a different perspective, almost like an out-of-body experience in some ways, because the way I talk about it is I really saw myself versus the sort of autopilot, like, yeah, I'm brushing my teeth and there I am,
Yeah.
But I just saw myself from a different light. And in that moment, I knew I had to do something. And I also knew in that moment, in a way that I'd never really known before, that it was my choice to do something, and that it was a choice to either stay sort of stuck in this pattern of being overwhelmed and frustrated and scared and worrying and all of those things, or to take charge of myself and try to change it. It was like, it was a fork in the road moment for sure.
Yeah.
So jump forward many years, I changed my life. And when at some point at this point I had zero yoga experience when this happened. I didn't even really know. I mean, I sort of knew, but I didn't really know what yoga was.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point after that, I was introduced to yoga and really recognized that what I had done to stop this habit of pulling on my eyebrows and eyelashes as a way of coping with inner turmoil, inner chaos. The way that I had changed that was yoga. And so when I sort of started to understand that, I said, I've got to get into this. I have to figure out what this is all about. And so after practicing for a little while, I decided to change, similar to your experience, like completely change my career and got certified as a yoga therapist, because that was my experience, that yoga was a treatment, a way to heal myself, as a remedy to what I was experiencing.
Yeah. So in clinical terms, there's a word that I know I'm probably going to butcher it, but I'm going to say it anyway. So in our diagnostic manual that we use as therapists, it's trichotillomania. I believe that's how you pronounce it, right? Which is thinking of the eyebrows and things like that. And so I just love that you started to really, that whole moment in the mirror, really, I call that the zoom out moment, where you really truly saw yourself.
Yep.
And then yoga kind of came into your periphery and you saw that, and that became part of your transformation. But more than anything, you made a decision, which is what really calls us to make a change in our life, right? If we live in the ambivalence of, oh, whatever, this is just going to happen to me, I'm powerless, I can't do anything. It's like, it will continue to be that way in your life. And you decided in that fork in the road, no, I actually have a choice in this. I'm not a victim to this.
Right. I just think that that's such a key piece of it.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the sort of main things that I teach and offer in my work is what I call reset. And it is simply a conscious choice to try a different way.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that it's so important is exactly what you're saying, is that we get sort of stuck in, or think that we're stuck in, these patterns of behavior, of thinking, of doing, and we feel like we don't have a choice. We feel like we don't have the opportunity to do something different. And what I have found in my work is that, and my working with women and talking to them about what is that all about, is so many times we're all looking for this sort of big overnight transformation, right?
Yeah, right. Yes.
The just the right New Year's resolution that's going to make everything better, like that we can stop on a time. Yeah, exactly, exactly. But I think it's really key to think about that big decision, right? That zoom out moment as something that you can do all the time as a practice.
Right. Well, I think that's the key with anything, right? First, it's like you having the awareness. You started to see things slightly different, or it became more aware, like, wow, I'm making it much more conscious, right? And then the curiosity kicks in. It's like, oh, I actually there's a potential for me to do something different. And then as you are taking those action steps, you're now practicing it. And that practice is what is the key to almost anything in life, really, because it's rewiring your brain.
That's right.
And that's so important. So, Stephanie, I want you just to share just a touch. I know you have talked about with some other people, or with the clients that you work with too, what are some signs that chronic stress is really impacting their life? So let's kind of start there to give people a heads up, because you and I were talking before I hit record, like, most people that we work with, oftentimes they are up in their head only. And so their thoughts are really driving things. And most of the time it's unconscious thinking. It's just the habits that are going on. And so that they're the ones driving life versus the person actually driving their own life. So what are some signs that chronic stress may be impacting the women who are listening?
Yeah, that's such a good question because you're right. I think especially women tend to think, oh, this is just how it is, right?
Mhm,
This is
mhm.
just the way it should be or needs to be,
Yep.
all of these things. And so I have a couple of, there's a ton of very specific symptoms to chronic stress,
Mhm.
but I think that a few of the sort of overall things to look at are the sense of feeling out of control or that you
Yeah.
need to take control. I think that's a really big one. I know that I've heard so often in my work of talking to women is that like, oh, if I could just figure out that thing, if I could
Mhm.
just take control over, this, and that inner sense of I'm not doing it, I'm not, that shame or
Yeah.
sense of, oh, I'm not good enough, or I can't, I don't know why I can't do this. I can't figure this out. And especially, I think both of our audiences of, achievers, of
Mhm.
women who like do have a lot of air quotes here control over their lives, right, where
Mhm.
they're very capable of managing so much, and yet and even on the outside it really appears that way,
Right.
and yet there's this inner sense of not being in control, of not being managing, not being good enough, not sort of handling everything in the way that you want. So I think that's a really big one. Um, Another one I think is just the sense of often think about it as like a hamster wheel,
Yes.
where right, where it's like I'm always in reaction mode, just trying to get through, check off the list to get to the end of the day, so that I can, crash out and get up and do it all again.
Yeah.
Um, and in that, there's just a real sense of lack of fulfillment and lack of meaning on a deeper level.
Yes, and I think the hamster in the wheel, the way I kind of talk about it with my clients is it's like these ongoing thoughts that they're almost incessant. They go and they go and
Yes.
they go. Just like you're saying, it's like the do, and do versus it's like, wow, if we're in the reacting mode, it's being able to shift into more of a responding mode.
That's
That
right.
it's, yeah, my emotions aren't running me. I'm aware of them. I acknowledge them and I move through them and respond.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a great segue to another, I think, real indicator that that chronic stress is negatively impacting your life, or just impacting, because I think chronic stress is inherently negatively impacting your life, not stress in general, but chronic
Yes,
stress where
chronic.
you're really just always somewhat in that state, which is just the sense of you have been trying to do something for a long time, but it's not changing.
Mhm.
You talked about the hamster wheel and the emotions and that inner sense of I've been dealing with this. I've been feeling this way for years or maybe
Mhm.
decades.
Mhm.
I think can really be a key indicator that it's there's something going on that can be shifted. Yeah, and then I think one other thing that's really key to start to pay attention to start to notice, it's an indicator that chronic stress is negatively affecting your life, is in a similar way, like not feeling intentional,
Yeah.
not feeling like you've got something that you're really working towards that's meaningful within yourself.
Mhm.
And, so many of the women that I've worked with and that I talk to on a fairly regular basis, they're outwardly focused, their
Yeah.
kids, their jobs, their, and even with good things like their nonprofits, they're volunteering,
Mm-hmm.
they're doing all the things.
Yeah.
And yet there's a disconnect. And we were talking about this earlier, a bit of a disconnect of, why am I doing those things? What is it really meaning and fulfilling within me? And is that really important? It's sort of the shoulds versus the true sort of heart-centered desire, sense of why I'm doing things.
Yeah. And you've hit it so often, when I'm talking with my guests and some of the solo episodes I've done, when the shoulds are running things in life, you're looking for that external validation, you're looking for the external permission. And so then there's where the dis-ease often comes from.
Yes.
Yeah. And you don't know who you are. And
That's
it's
right.
not uncommon because women, we have such mixed messages about who we need to be, how we need to show up, not show up, what we need, what's okay to say, what's not. And it's like, oh my gosh. And
Yeah.
it's remembering, these things were ingrained from years ago, right? From our ancestors,
Sure.
there's some of that. And then just as little kids, where you grew up, how you grew up. And it's being able to bring a lot of that stuff forward again through the consciousness and being mindful of what is the ticker tape parade running through your mind every single day.
Yeah.
Those automatic thoughts, to be able to start paying attention to that and shifting those.
Yeah. And I think that's a great way of saying that. I think another really common thing that women experience that is a major indication, that maybe even comes before some of the things that we've already talked about, is an inability to be with yourself, right? Like we're talking about, what do you really want, or what's really going on inside of yourself? And before that might come the sense of, and you were talking about the doing, before that might come the sense of like, I can't sit still. Like, even if I do carve out downtime, like I, am mindlessly scrolling social media or looking for something to binge watch on Netflix, or, distracting myself. So I think that's a really interesting thing to start to look at, when you just can't be with yourself, when you need to shift your focus outside of yourself. It really does indicate a real disconnect.
Yeah.
And that's what your stress, I think that's a really key piece of my work and the way that I teach, is that is why your stress is happening, because it's trying to say, hey, something is out of alignment here. Something is going on, and most likely it's something within you, but something is going on that needs to be addressed here.
Yeah. Well, and that's so part of what you're doing too with yoga. It's helping people tune back into their bodies. Cause we were saying again before I hit record, it's like our bodies are such great in way thermometers or warning systems, or, hey, this is out of alignment. And if we're not in touch with our body and the signals that it's giving us, then we can perpetuate the issue versus release it.
Yes.
And move forward. So share a little bit about why or how women who are listening can start to tune into their body and do it on a daily basis versus what, again, you and I were talking about. It's like yoga's kind of over there. It's one and done. I went to the class, come home. You're like, no. It's a philosophy of life. It's like incorporated a little more. So share a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I think, we've been talking a little bit about automatic patterns and how when things become automatic, we're not aware of them in some ways. And so I think any moment of being able to look within, to notice, and there's a couple different levels you can do this. The body is often the easiest in some ways, because it's sort of, the most obvious aspect of our experience. Although I think some would argue that our mental mental loop is a very obvious aspect of our experience. But just paying attention and working with the sense of sometimes I call it a scientist mindset, like
Yeah.
working with paying attention in a way that is not disconnected, but more sort of stand back. I like that, like zoomed out
Mm-hmm.
view. And here's an interesting way to think about it. When you have a cold, there's symptoms of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your nose might be running, or you might be congested, you might be coughing, or you might be sneezing, you might have a fever, or you might not, all of these different things. And so if you decide to go to the drugstore to get cold medicine, you pay close attention to those symptoms, because the medications are tailored to the symptoms you have, right? You don't want to get a decongestant if your nose is in fact, running,
Right.
right?
Right.
And you don't blame or judge or scold yourself for having these symptoms. You
Mm-hmm.
simply pay attention to them. So I think one way to really start to tune in to the parts of your life that are causing you stress, specifically with the body, is just to start to pay attention to what your body is experiencing as information, as a symptom, air quotes again, in a way that is not, blame, is not judge, is not scolding or shaming yourself. It's
Mm-hmm.
simply your body's way of saying, hey, something's going on. Just like if you broke your leg, you wouldn't feel ashamed of that. You would say,
Right.
oh, there's pain here. This
Mm-hmm.
is something that needs to get looked at. And so a very simple way to do this, and I do it on the regular, is as soon as I wake up, sometimes before I even get out of bed, and sometimes, full disclosure, while I'm peeing, because that's the
Mm-hmm.
first thing that most of us do, right?
Yep.
I simply give myself 30, 60 seconds to just feel my body as a sort of a plane of experience, as
Yeah.
a plane of sensation. Like, sometimes I visualize the like heat mapping idea, like
Mm-hmm.
what spots are dark red versus what spots are blue,
Mm-hmm.
as a sense of like, what am I feeling the most and what am I not feeling at all? Like, what's going on here? So that can be a really easy way to start to just pay attention.
Yeah.
But again, that scientist mindset, that sense of, I'm not looking for anything in particular here. I'm not judging. I'm not having any preconceived notions. I'm not, right or wronging or should or shouldn'ting anything. I'm just noticing,
Yeah.
And in fact, there's a whole specific practice of yoga called svadhyaya, which is self-study, paying
Hmm.
attention on purpose without judgment.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I think another great way to tap into the parts of your life that are causing you stress is to really notice when you are having that experience, those predominant experiences of
Yes.
stress, right? That is, again, your body and mind's way of saying, alert, alert. When you think
Mm-hmm.
about the stress response, it's actually very purposeful, right? It's
Right.
there to help you survive. It's there to put your body and mind into the exact state that you need to, as a call to action, that you need to do something about your current situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're experiencing that, pay attention to what's going on. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I find, and thankfully in our modern day life, is not it's not a scenario where we are actually in physical danger,
Right.
which is what we think about with the stress response and, sort of cavemen running from saber-toothed tigers.
Mm-hmm.
But when we are experiencing our stress response, when we are having that sense of tension and a change in the breath and the overwhelm or the loop, the chaotic inner experience, that resistance, that like, oh my God, sort of reaction, what is going on? And not only what's going on in our outer experience, but what are we thinking about? What are we feeling? What's happening? And are we reacting to that? You
Yes.
said so well, perpetuating that experience. Are we reacting to that experience, that inner experience, as an emergency in and of itself?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a key thing right there. Because as you're saying, yeah, our stress response in our brain is it's a perception thing more often than not. Is it perceiving an actual threat or just thought that it's a threat, a perceived that it's a threat when in reality it's not? And
Right.
so, yeah, getting curious and paying attention to what is truly going on so you can really make a more informed decision as you go
Yeah.
forward. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I love the way you say that, because that exactly mimics the make peace with stress method, which is paying attention. And then that middle piece is, or the third step of the make peace with stress method is, in yoga, it's called Ishvara Pranidhanha, which is often translated to surrender. But what part of the way that I talk about it is just opening up to the experience.
Yeah.
And a really fun way that I teach it and think about it often is, when you have your stress response, let's just call it, oh no, right? Oh
I love
no,
it. Yeah.
right? Oh no, why is this happening? Oh no, what am I going to do? Oh no, that you can shift that in that piece of getting curious, of paying attention with a more open-minded, perception, is okay. So it's the same thing, from oh no, why is this happening? And instead of that, going, okay, why is this happening? Right?
Yeah.
It's a very small but profound shift.
It is.
Oh no, what am I going to do? To, okay, what am I going to do?
Yeah. Because
Right?
when you say, "Oh no," what goes off of me, it's like there's a instant fear response that goes with it. It's
Right.
an escalation. And I always say
That's
it
right.
goes, what happens is you go from the wide open funnel down into a more constricted place when fear is driving
Right.
it, versus
Yes.
okay, it stays more elevated and more
Yeah.
expansive. And so it's like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
What's
Yep.
this?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And again, I just want to reiterate one of the things we talked about early on in our conversation about that zoomed out view. I love the way you say that. And also specifically the choice, that fork in the road
Yeah.
moment, that moment of reset, that recognition that you have dominion at that point of your inner experience, that you can do that you should, and I'm sorry to use the word should, but that
Should in a
that you
healthy
have the
way. Yeah.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Let's just say that the opportunity is there for you
Mhm.
to make that all the time. And I think if we specifically start to use our stress response as an indication of a very potent opportunity to
Yeah.
use that decision making, that shifting from the narrow funnel to that more zoomed out view,
Mhm.
that oh no to okay, that's when we start to really affect positive change. Because if we're not becoming aware of that and then practicing making that conscious choice, we just stay stuck in that loop of perpetuating the same experience. And that's when the stress becomes chronic stress. That's when you feel
Yeah.
like you are on the hamster loop and can't get off. That's when you elevate and escalate the daily challenging experiences that we all have,
Mhm.
into something that feels, in your nervous system, like perpetual emergencies.
Yeah. Well, one thing I like too, how you explain the stress too, is opportunities, because I think it
Yeah.
really is opportunities. Yet, what often is labeled, and even I said it with you earlier, is kind of like we talk about stress management, but it's not necessarily about we need to manage it and kind of stay stuck in our old loops. When you turn that into, again, it's just a simple word phrase, it's just a flip flop of how we think of things, how we talk about it, because our words really do have power. Like
For
the
sure.
stress is an opportunity for me to gain more insight into where I am, how my body's responding to it, how I'm thinking about things, and do I want to continue this or not?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's absolutely key. I'd love to throw in here something that I talk about a lot in Make Peace with Stress when we get to this point of full resistance, full stress
Mm,
mode to being, surrendered to every challenging experience of life. That I just like to acknowledge that can feel like a big leap,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
From constant resistance, this isn't fair, this isn't the way this should be, I don't like this, I don't want this, to why is this here for me? What can I gain from this? It can feel like a big leap, especially if you're deeply ingrained in that cycle of resistance, let's
Hmm.
just call it, of fear based perspectives and that sort of thing. And so I always like to offer what I think of as a lily pad, right? If you're
Mm,
to a
yes.
halfway point, and that is gratitude. And,
Yeah.
and it goes hand in hand with the idea of it being an opportunity when you have the stress response in your body, and that can look different for many of us, but there's some similar sense of inner turmoil, of inner discontent,
Hmm.
um, that again is purposeful. But when you have that in that moment, just like you would pay attention to your cold symptoms in that moment, saying thank you for
Yep.
showing me that there's something here for me in this moment. Oh, thank you for this opportunity to step out of my pattern and try a different way of being more
Hmm.
intentional. Thank you, for this challenge right now so that I can work with what I really want instead.
Hmm.
Thank you. Gratitude can really quickly and easily shift you out of that fear-based response to that more of an openness, more of
Yeah.
a sense of, okay, let's see what's going on here.
Well, yeah, and it goes back to if it's, you're thinking, well, this is a problem, and if that problem has a solution, then it's not a problem,
Right.
right? And so that
Exactly.
subtle shift of gratitude helps you get out of that old neural pathway, and again
Yes.
calms your system down, which means you're staying in the front part of your brain versus in the back part, and being able to say, okay, what are my opportunities? Who can I reach out to? What are my resources? And you get back into the resourcefulness versus, yeah,
Yeah.
limitations. Yeah, love it.
Yeah. And even like the what do I need right
Hmm.
now? Right. And because we've talked about the challenge sometimes of being with yourself and knowing what you really want and what's
Hmm.
important to you. And when you're in that stress response, it can feel like survival mode.
Yeah.
And when you start to practice that sense of opening up, of surrendering via gratitude,
Hmm.
if that's the tool that can really start to get you there, then you start to be able to connect more with, okay, what do I need right now?
Yeah.
Right. And when you think about the stress response, that's what it's there for. It's
Right.
there to say, high alert, what,
Yep.
you need something.
Right. Right. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Again, it's the tapping into becoming more aware of that we're not just our head and our mind. We have a body that helps us gain insight to what's working in our lives and what is not. It's having the willingness and openness to tap into those beautiful resources that's all in that one beautiful body that you have, the vessel that you're in, and opening up to the possibilities. I love it.
Yeah. I'd like to also just add to that, when you do this as a practice, when you do pay attention and start to open up, practicing opening up to your inner experience, it builds confidence. It
Yeah.
really builds a lot of confidence because you start to recognize, like you said, that your body and your mind and your inner experience is all there for you to
Hmm.
help you be more intentional, to help you connect with what's important to you. And the more you do it, even in small ways, the stronger that pattern becomes in your brain, the easier and more automatic it becomes, which is super helpful. But also, you really start to build a level of confidence that I think is, very deep. Let's just say it's very, it's really heartfelt,
Yeah.
because you start to open up to your inner experience and recognize that inner experience is your guide for life.
Mhm. Yeah. I like to say, it's really, tapping into what your soul is calling you to do with the higher power,
Yes.
God, spirit, divine, whatever term you want to use. But when you give yourself that permission to go into, sometimes again, like we talked about, you were saying at the very early on in the conversation, there can be such a fear around getting to know yourself. It's like embracing the messy middle of it, because that's where all the magic really is.
Yep, for
Uh,
sure.
and remember, it's time limited. It's not a forever. It's going to be scary and overwhelming and whatever other label you want to stick on it. It's like it's a moment in time, and it passes. Every moment is different.
Well, and talking about it as an opportunity, I think it's important to acknowledge that when you have that opportunity, like, again, just to keep it simple, like when you're experiencing your stress response, that is the opportunity you have to
Yeah.
tap into your soul's longing. You can't do it when it's not happening. You
Right.
can't do it in advance, right? You can't
Right.
say, is it just is not available for you in that moment. And you can't do it after the fact. That
Mhm.
truly is the moment to harness. And so, in terms of, it's not always going to be scary, or this is a problem without a solution. Like in that moment is the practice. It's not, what am I going to do tomorrow? Or, oh, I wish I had done this yesterday. It's
Right.
right now I have an opportunity to work on this, and to whatever capacity I can in this moment.
Yeah.
Not the way I hope to be able to work on it next week, not the way
Mhm.
I wish I had worked on it last week. It's right now, whatever I can do, whatever small shift I can make to get what I need, and to look within and get what I need out of this moment for myself.
Yeah.
That's the practice.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, Stephanie, I know before we wrap up here and I give the ladies kind of your website and how they can get a hold of you and all that good stuff through the show notes, share somebody who has inspired you. Maybe that's somebody recently, over the years, whatever, but who has inspired you?
Oh, I have to absolutely 100% say the women that I connect with
Yeah.
on a regular basis, because I just feel so deeply in my bones, and I bet you we share this belief and feeling that women are the key to
Hmm.
saving the world, which
Yeah.
sounds really dramatic in some ways, but I just so strongly believe that the, air quotes again, the stress that the world has been experiencing for so long is an indication of the imbalance
Hmm.
that we have in our societies of women's experiences, women's voices, women's dreams, women's souls and heartfelt desires
Hmm.
not being as much a part of the conversation and collective experience as they need to be.
Hmm.
And so that's what really inspires me, is just being able to see, the women that I've worked with, or just to connect with, or, just even my girlfriends,
Yep.
how much depth and richness and genius and wisdom and heart and compassion and love there is. And just really recognizing that sort of the secret to making that more a part of our individual and collective experience is walking right through this experience of stress and of resistance. And, who is it that said everything you want is on the other side of fear?
Yeah.
Is just saying, okay, let's do this together. Let's really work through this together, and knowing that it's an individual practice that really serves the whole.
Yeah. Well, and that's the name of the podcast, right? The Soul-Filled Sisterhood. It's all about women coming together and celebrating one another, inspiring one another, and just hearing the steps that over the years that have been taken from women before us, the women that will come after us. But it's together, we really do make a difference in the world. And yes, I definitely think having female relationships is a big key as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, ladies, if you want to connect with Stephanie, her website is makepeacewithstress.com. And again, I will have that in the show notes so that you can get the information along with her social media links, all that good stuff. And Stephanie, you have a free gift for people too, which I know it's called makepeacewithstress.com/quiz. Can you share just a little bit about what that quiz is?
Sure. It's a stress type quiz.
Beautiful.
So, we've talked a little bit about the stress response and how it can look a little different for different people. This quiz is a way to sort of hone in on how stress manifests for you.
Well, Stephanie, I just want to say thank you so much for being on today, for sharing your wisdom, but also the differences that you are making in not only women's lives, but also men, because you also work with them too, but how you're just making a difference in our world. So thank you so much for doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me, Nicole. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this good work.
Thank you for listening. Wondering if perfectionism is holding you back in your business or life? Or just maybe it's impacting all of your relationships? Well, head over to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/perfectionist and receive your 10 signs you might be a perfectionist today. Till then, take care.